Hey, welcome again to Real Talk with Coach T, Unscripted, where we have real but raw conversations for us grown folks. Today we have Miss Serita on our podcast today. Take over, Miss Serita.
Hey everyone, this is Serita Love of Success Junkie, an achievement lifestyle brand where I am a business success matchmaker, matching problems to solutions. Tamika, I am so excited about starting this dialogue with you today. So what are we discussing?
Daddy's girls, everyone. The pros and cons of a daddy's girl, because we know a lot of women have this issue. So we want to start off with daddy's girls, right? And when we hear about daddy's girls, we think, oh, they were so loved and they were the center of attention. But we don't talk about the daddy issues that come with daddy girls.
Oh, that's what we're doing today? Yes. Because a lot of times when I hear, even from other women who are or claim to be daddy's girls, because sometimes they think they are, and then you have a conversation with them, you're like, well, that ain't so good. Right. There's be some weird conversations going on between dads and daughters. But sometimes when people hear daddy's girl, they think entitlement. You know, they think princess treatment. I see that's everywhere on social media right now. But you and I have had a candid dialogue off the record about, you know, the many other facets of being a daddy's girl. So I know that you are, at least from the outside looking in and conversations that we've had, our daddy's girl experiences are different. So can we talk about what was your daddy's girl experience like?
I grew up, I was in the household with my father majority of my life, but even when I wasn't in my teenage years, it didn't feel like it. And to top that off, I'm surrounded by all male uncles. And because they don't have daughters, I was their daughter as well. So I guess you could say it's a shared custody thing going on. So what one uncle didn't do, or what my dad didn't do or wasn't able to give, I had an uncle that would. So I had an uncle who, that's like my best friend, and we go everywhere together. Then I have an uncle who, he's more structured, but if I need financial backing, he's gonna make sure whatever I need is done. My other uncle, he's passed away now, but he was my teddy bear and super, super smart. If I needed to know anything educational, super, super smart, I could go to him. And then there's my baby uncle who, he's much more mature now, but before that, he was a ladies' man, which all of them are undercoverly, right?
Yeah.
So by being the only niece and daughter, I think it was everything for me. And then with my granddad, even though I have brothers and boy cousins, my granddad used to always take me upstairs if he didn't have enough money to give all the grandkids. And he would be like, here, whatever it was, 20 or whatever, and like, don't tell them, you know, I gave it to you, right? And, you know, I knew that I was special to him, not that they weren't.
Yeah.
But I think because it was a soft spot for a girl.
So you just made me think about something that I hadn't considered. Daddy's girl, I had the uncles too. Like you just shared your teddy bear uncle who's deceased. I actually had an uncle who's now deceased as well, who was actually, when I think about it, more of my father figure than my father. And wow, I want to go into like what that experience was like, because for me, my daddy was a happy-go-lucky guy. Everybody loved him. You know, him and my mom, and I always shared that, as I've shared with you before, my mom and dad got married when I was 8, and I think that was maybe in the winter of 92, and my mom passed away the summer of 93 when I was 9 years old. And my dad was young, you know, he was only 29, you know, when his new wife just passed away. So he couldn't take care of me out the gate. So I ended up staying with his sister, and his sister had a lot of sons who were like big brothers to me. And my dad was present, but he wasn't my caregiver, if that makes sense. But he would, you know, I would see him often. We would go shopping. I would get jewelry. We would have our own little dining experiences together. And you just couldn't tell me I wasn't a daddy's girl.
Right.
You know, but I realized as an adult, and I know we're probably going to dive into that a little bit later, but as a young girl, I thought that was everything, and I thought that's all a girl needed, you know, the things, in a sense. So even the uncle that passed away, my Uncle E, he was that fast money man, you know, light eye, green eyes, fair skin, cars, the women, and he was a leader. He was an alpha male, you know, so my needs were always provided, and I always felt protected with my Uncle E. I grew up in Inglewood, and I think the last thing I'll say about this right now is I felt so protected. It's interesting having this conversation because I always talk about where I didn't feel protected until I think about my Uncle E. And what this looks like is the early days of the cell phones, like the big, the brick phones.
Yes.
I remember when I used to have to walk from block to block in Inglewood, I would see guys disrespect other girls, and when I crossed different streets, there was a different level of treatment, and the girls would be like, "Why does she get treated like that?" And they're like, "Do you know who our uncle is?"
Right.
You know, so that gives you like a sense of what would you call
Privilege.
that? It's privilege.
Yes, definitely.
So that was something I had with my uncle. But I want to pass the ball back to you in the sense of let's take a deeper dive to like our daddies, right? Like our actual dads. You know, what were pros and cons? We said we would talk about pros and cons today. What were the pros and cons of the way you were reared by your dad and the things maybe you inadvertently learned just by observing him?
So for my dad, like your Uncle E, he was very street. He was big in his, you know, season. So in that regard, I definitely physically always felt protected. But my dad was not emotionally available. But whatever I needed or wanted, for that matter, he would buy, especially if it was hiding one of his girlfriends in their secrets.
Ooh.
Which, in hindsight, I'm a therapist, right? I get paid to keep secrets.
Wow. Full circle moment.
Yeah, it is. I was molded early, but then you got to think, even with my uncles, I would probably say one of my uncles, he's always has been the family man, like my grandfather.
Okay.
But the rest, not so much.
And I can't say I directly witnessed that. Like growing up, I wasn't in close proximity of family men. I didn't see that personally. How do you think that, because I do have something to say, but how do you think, like, just having that observation of, like, that, were you close to that relative, the one who was more the family man?
Yes.
Did you admire anything about, you know, what you saw in that situation in comparison to other?
I think for me, I'm blessed because I literally have every facet in my uncles, right? So that's why I'm not this bitter person against marriage, and I really can even help in marriages because I've only been surrounded by healthy marriages.
Oh, wow.
Now, the single or living girlfriend and all of those things, and those weren't so healthy. But for me, I think growing up seeing that the only thing I seen was family because my grandparents were married, never seen them argue. He was married till his wife died a few years ago, actually.
Wow. Never
seen them argue, never any scandals of my grandfather and him ever with women. And I will say, even though I seen cheating, to this day, I can honestly say I've never seen a woman cross the threshold to address the other woman. So no woman ever addressed my mother.
Wow.
So even in that regard, that's why I think that's so big for me to be protected in that sense. Because and I hate to use the main, because I really think nobody's winning. So I hate that word.
That's a whole other episode, right?
Yeah. But because I'll say she was the woman of the house, maybe that's the right word. It's like, don't cross his family.
Yeah.
You know?
But then how do we, really know? Because I'm observing now in present day that I guess this is back in the day too. Some women had almost identical situations that they wouldn't believe in a million years that something else was going on. So maybe they thought he worked another shift and he came home and there was a routine that was maintained. Where do you think like things hit the fan, to the point that when you look at like both of the scenarios, one woman knows that she's more significant than the other, or how do you measure that?
And I think it's probably from experienced childhood too, right? Like whatever you perceive as your measuring stick. Like in my mother's case, my mother did her thing too. So
you told me that.
Right? So it was like I don't, like, again, I've never heard the conversation. To this day, I've never heard my mom say anything about other women, about my dad. Wow. I just seen it, right? Even my dad, he's never said anything about other men with my mother. But I know what I've seen. I know how many gifts I got to keep everybody's secrets, right?
That's so interesting.
And to this day, never told, my mom is deceased, but I've never told her anything my dad did, and I never told my dad anything my mom did.
So something that I have the privilege and pleasure of observing with you that I admire is you give a lot of gifts.
I do.
Like, you are a gift giver. Yeah. And it's just really interesting how, you know, as an adult, you've translated that to something good. Like when, as you reflect on, you know, what it meant back then, you're teaching, you know, people how to heal and, you know, be more mentally well through what you know about your life experiences. So I got a quick question for you. At what point in time did you know that something wrong was happening? You know, like, because from a kid's lens, you know, you're just like, I get gifts all the time, Dad. You do this thing. And,
no, I
know,
do.
Like,
he told me, don't tell.
You have to be really advanced. And I think that's so awesome for as a little girl to be so observant, to be like, wait a minute.
So I had 2 incidents that I can recall, right? My uncle has 2 sons that are the same age.
Yeah.
So that goes right there, right?
Irish twins or?
They the same age but different birthdays, I guess you could say.
Okay.
And so that right there, you know, seeing 2 different women. Yeah. You know, so that within itself was one incident I can remember, but never speaking of any of it. With my dad, it was the first time. I think this is probably the most significant that I remember. Was when he took me to get my hair braided for school pictures. And the lady was braiding my hair, and she was from Detroit, I know now. And she was braiding my hair, and I looked up because I smelled burnt hair, and I never had smelled that before. And when I looked up, they were kissing above my head. Now, I never told my dad this until probably like maybe 4 years ago, because I had buried it. Wow. And when we left, I distinctly remember, hey, you know, don't tell your mom. And we went to Toys R Us after that. And I remember getting the Barbies and the Cabbage Patch. And I came home and cut the Barbie doll's hair off in my little red wagon, and I put it up.
The new doll?
Yeah. Because as a kid, I can honestly say I knew I was angry. Yeah. But I didn't know why. As an adult, I understand and can process why I was angry. Wow. But as a kid, I didn't know why. But I remember cutting the hair off because my dad was so mad, but he didn't say anything. Wow. Okay. But I know now that was just me, the act of wanting to cut my own hair. Because you made me lie, or she didn't ask, but basically an omission, I guess you can say, to the first person who ever loved me.
That's deep.
Yeah.
That's deep. Was it a Barbie?
Oh yeah,
like I was like, you know,
that's all because you know I love Barbies.
I like this the Barbie era, and we know you love your Barbie pink.
Yes,
okay?
Yes, I do.
So there is something that stands out to me with my dad. So because I didn't really get to see him and my mom around each other much, I mean, it was such a short stint, and those earlier years are a blur. So I do remember maybe a year after my mom passed away, my dad ended up dating a woman who looked almost exactly like my mom. It was a woman from Atlanta. And I thought he was like going to marry this woman, this and that. And psychologically, like that like messed me up. Like, and she seemed like a really nice woman, but it was eerie that this woman looked so much like my mom. But we briefly covered like protection and security. Like I said, my dad gave me a lot of things, but there was a moment between the ages of maybe 12 and 14, the household that I was living in, mostly boys. My aunt was married, she had a husband. And I think, it's not that I think, her husband had a really strange attraction to me. And it was very uncomfortable, to the point that we went to the grocery store one day, and I was in the passenger seat of his car, and he pleasured himself in my presence, in the car. I know nothing about what a man's body part does. Can you imagine like how traumatic something like that is, in the sense of I don't even understand what's going on. But later on my downtime, I'm just like, because my older cousins, they're teenagers, and I hear them talking about girls, and I hear them talking about the difference between our body parts. But that was the first time I had saw a male body part, and I eventually share with the wife, my aunt, who's now deceased a few years. I told her, a few things. I told her about that incident, and I told her that several times he would, in the middle of the night, Tamika, I would see his shadow in my room. And I slept with a few cousins in the bedroom that I was in, and they would even ask, why is he always hovering over Serita? Like they would wake up and no one would say anything. So I'm a deep sleeper. I never said, because I never felt anything, but why is a grown man like constantly coming into my room in the wee hours of the night, whether you're just looking at me, whether you're thinking about doing something. But eventually I spoke up because I was beyond uncomfortable. And so fast forward, where I'm going with this is I was put out at 14. So honor student, well behaved, well mannered. And she was like, my man, you know how they say now, my man. So she chose her man. And that was when my dad reappeared to help and try to be more stable, in a sense. But remember, my dad's 20 years older than me, so he was like 34. Still a little immature, but the short version of this is 8th grade, I went to 4 different schools. So I'm in and out of different homes because everyone knows what happened. And they're like, where's the best household to raise Serita? And my dad's like, I can take care of my kids, And girl, eventually he get us somewhere to stay. But I have a room, no bed, clothes and laundry bags. Like I'm talking, girl, it's like the bottom of the barrel type living. But I'm living with my daddy, So, but now with my dad.
And did that make you feel good though?
It did.
Yeah. You didn't care probably that you even didn't have that stuff.
Exactly. However, later on in my life, I did start to treat myself like bare minimum. So that it was something indirect that later on impacted me down the road. But the main thing that I wanted to highlight was I only stayed with him a certain amount of time because my mom's side was like, he can't take care of that girl. So a full circle moment that happened, I ended up living back with like aunts on my mom's side. I was on rotation. But where I'm going with this is my dad ended up being good friends with that man that did what he did to me.
Did he ever know?
Yes, he knew.
Wow.
I couldn't understand for the life of me, like, my idea of protection is like, daddy gonna F him up. Like if my uncle Eno, that man wouldn't be living today. And I know that for a fact because I know what life he was about. And he didn't play about us. So I just say that to say that story is commonplace, for a lot of women, and it's an unsung song, in a sense. So I love listening to you and actually seeing how you're catered to, in a sense. And your term, I love, we could say together.
Yes.
What's the term? Well loved. I love that. And I want to just, come back to you to just make a connection high level. Because we have to address these things. And, so you had a unique, more indirect and later on direct experience. I had more of a direct than indirect experience. How do you translate this to women who have your experiences and or mine, or a combination of both, like as the expert and professional that you are in the wellness space?
I really feel like that's why it's a pro and a con to it.
Yeah.
And ironically, we create superheroes of dads in our head. And that's crazy.
Our daddy can do no wrong.
None, right? He can be absent and still have the same privilege of no wrong. And that's crazy as women that we admire that about men, and it even goes into your adulthood, kind of like with your aunt. That was a prime example of adoring on a man.
Yeah.
And it started young, I'm sure,
And I don't know her story.
Right.
Because full transparency, she had 6 children, 5 sons, 1 daughter, 5 different fathers.
Wow.
That's telling.
Yeah.
So me disrupting her stability, saying that her husband, has done, what I can't make this up. I don't even know what's happening. I never saw porn or anything yet at that point in my life.
Yeah.
But that triggered something inside of her that was just like, you gotta go. Because I can't face that truth. Because maybe I don't know her story and I never will.
Or maybe the truth was maybe that would rock her stability because this was the stable she had ever been.
You're right.
Yeah.
And this person took, he ended up being the head of a household of 6 total children, including his own child.
Yeah.
So, girl, I share that story more now than ever. And I shared it when she was here. So it's not that my family knows. Yeah. And I'm unapologetic about it because I do want more young girls to speak up and get the support that they need earlier on because I didn't get it. I didn't get therapy until maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
Right. That's true. And it molds us. So, when you think about with that experience, even though you had a positive interaction, right, with your dad somewhat, but your Uncle E in a different sense of being physically safe, right? And then here's this other interaction with the next male who's supposed to be the male figure, but predatorial, right? And women do deal with that, and it shows up in our today if you don't get mended or therapy. Yeah. And everybody won't go to therapy, so that's definitely the reason for this podcast, so we can just start unveiling a lot of conversations that need to challenge your thinking, your perspective. Because with me, even though, like you said, you've seen it, my uncles, my brothers, they cater. They really love me.
It's a wonderful sight to observe, to see.
The flip side, though, is so I even said this a minute ago before we started about sometimes I wonder, am I capable of monogamy? Because I've seen so much, and it's not because I'm, like I said, when I was young in my 20s or whatever, ironically, my mom's 20 years apart from me.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I was a cheater and I only attracted cheaters. And I know why subconsciously, because you were safe. Because you couldn't hurt me because I already knew who you were.
Girl, stop telling my story.
I was like, I'm going to protect me.
Yeah, at all costs.
Yeah, and nobody ever gets to meet my family.
So let's dial back real quick, because how does negative observation trump positive? Because you did get to see the good marriages and the stability and things like that. But do you think there were maybe trust issues? Like, even though it looked good, maybe there's just something I don't see. Like, was there any skepticism or anything about the good? Because that's interesting.
Yeah, it wasn't. I thought it was boring, if you want me to be truthful.
Is this so?
Yes, I know there's good marriages, but here it's so, and I think I'm attracted to the lifestyle, kind of like my dad.
Wow.
My dad was attracted to the fast money. Even though he worked a 9 to 5, he was 2 different people.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. So for me, it was like, man, my ego. If I could say anything else, it would be my ego to be stroked. If it was a man who didn't like a big girl, oh yeah, I'm finna get you. Just because you said that.
Yeah, you about to suffer for everybody else that think like you.
I'm gonna show you what,
Yeah.
So I think for me, the challenge, the ego, it was fun in a lot of ways until I hurt people.
So when you just mentioned boring, right? Would you say you're someone who likes routine?
No,
me neither. Okay, so
No.
So of course, so if it's like day in, day out, same old thing, same old, you're like, okay, I need a little razzle dazzle, shake it up a little.
Yeah, like definitely. Even even in my intimate life, I used to role play, because I definitely can't. Oh no, and I think that for me, because like I said, even though there was a commitment, definitely alignment with God, because I'm very spiritual.
Yeah.
So I know there's good there. Because my uncle literally stood by his wife's side to the day she died.
Wow.
And they lost a child. And normally it's unheard of, really, when you lose a child to stay together. And I'm not saying it was roses, but I seen them work through things. So, but for me, oh, okay, that's not exciting.
So with what you know about you today, what would be an ideal situation? Like, even though we may question like monogamy and things like that, but if there was a situation that was just ideal across the board for you romantically, we gonna go there for a quick second, since this is for the grown folks,
right?
I mean, what would that look like? What, kind of
let me do me.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds crazy, right?
It doesn't actually. It doesn't.
Yeah, I had somebody told me once, like, because they said they didn't believe in monogamy, but what they would do, they would go out the country to cheat. And I was like, that sounds very
all the way overseas.
Because guess what? Like, what's the chances of you really catching me and know if, like, you don't need the attachment of feelings. I think when somebody's too accessible, that's when you've made cheating a relationship.
Oh.
And those are two different things, right?
And my understanding now, like present day, is it's not cheating if you're not married. Is that's what this generation is saying?
But the truth is, it's kind of my saying about being single.
Yeah.
Right? You're not single. You're not married until you're married. You're still single, right?
Yeah.
But
even though before you get married, there are some very intense emotions. What's the word? Invested in their relationship. I don't know. I beg to differ with that. I don't fully. I think if you say you're committed to someone on paper or not on paper,
right. I think your word is your bond.
There you go.
So for me, it's like, don't ask, I don't tell.
There you go.
Yeah.
But see, the way you're saying that, this is where we're in sync, because we are, what is it, like think like a man? We're like the think like a man type.
I would definitely say I'm very in tune with my masculinity as much as my feminine. I know that how
there's a balance,
right?
Yep.
Even the way I dress, ironically, I can, even today, like, right, very flowy, very feminine dress.
She is colorful, y'all. She is fine. Listen,
right,
but and vibrant,
right? But a big face watch, which is usually a man's watch.
Come on.
But I got the feminine, little gleam.
Was this a gift? Was this watch a gift?
Yes, actually, my brother brought it for my birthday.
That's amazing. It's beautiful, y'all. I almost wish we was on camera for this one. But that's good. So you said something about addressing things. How do we call what elephants? For the sake of what we're talking about today with Daddy's Girls, what elephants can we call out in the room when it comes to not measuring, but recognizing if you had a healthy Daddy's Girl relationship or an unhealthy?
So for me, I think it's about the pros and cons, because if you want to be fair to the male figures in our life completely full circle, we had good and we had bad. So we had pros and we had cons. And I think being realistic and not like highlighting the real all the time, right? Glorifying things. Talk about both. Expose both. Like, expose, because there are some women who their daddy never was present, right? And it molds how they treat men or interact, right?
Yes.
They either can be two ways about it. They can be overly aggressive, or they can, for the lack of a better word, doormat it.
Oh no!
Right? Because
that's like that boredom you just said. No.
But that's that thriving for that love.
Oh.
And I think like we all have to sit and become self-aware. Like what part of us? Because people always say I'm this way because I was born that way. No, you're not.
No.
Experiences make you. So if anything, I would love for people to take away. What made you? Think about when the first time your heart got broke. When did you first learn about love? When did you first learn about heartbreak?
Yeah.
From not even just yourself, from observation.
Yeah.
And think about how today, and process how you look at love. Process how you feel about relationships, and really take that back further and figure out, where did all this come from?
Because nothing grinds my gears more than a woman in particularly, people, period. But when, we're talking about daddy's girl, so for the sake of conversation, that's just how I am.
No.
No.
But people aren't self-aware either. I have a thing that I talk to my clients about. So unfortunately, the truth is you cannot deal with anything that you won't expose.
Ouch.
Right? So first there's exposure.
Yeah.
And once you expose it, you're going to be self-aware it exists. You're going to try to ignore it, but it's almost like you got a white dress on, there's a black stain, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
Right?
And then patterns,
Yeah.
I'm a constant thing that I hate with a passion is when people are dating over and over again a different person, like the same person but a different face and body.
Oh, yeah.
Like what? Habitually, you just keep going down this path.
Yeah.
So that when you expose your truth, that's when everything changes.
Right. You become self-aware. And then again, hopefully after being self-aware so long, you start being accountable. You own it.
That's a goal of mine.
Yeah. And after you start owning it and you call it out enough and own it, especially if it's negative, then you're going to change it.
So what about we have so many people that are unrealistic about what they
Social
deserve.
media. That's social media.
It's just overkill. So I want us to go into there's something that you teach me often about a rose.
Let me say this before we get to that part, right?
Let's go.
Drive in here today. This is what happened. I took this picture when I was in Jamaica, and my back was to the camera, and I kind of like did a side view.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know why today I was looking at the picture because traffic was heavy, and I said, you know what? I really wanted to post this. Why do you keep going to what rejects you? If you don't want to be rejected, why go to the door that keeps closing? It's like we say, I don't like rejection. And I was thinking about if you don't like it, then why do you keep going to the door knowing that it's not going to open?
But sometimes they just don't know any better.
Do you not know any better, or are you just really trying to fill a void because now you're trying to check a box from your past?
Girl,
that's a just.
And you don't have. Look, I don't get speechless often, y'all. But I'm gonna leave that one for the experts. I don't know, but I do know what you just said. That was beautiful about exposing the person that does their inner work to be sick of. When you're sick of yourself, that's when you finally go, okay, how do I break this cycle? So until that person is gonna keep beating their head against the door until it bleeds out, or until it's enough pain for them to say, I'm sick of me, and there has to be another solution.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate. So that's why I'm just happy that people like you exist for us to have these kind of conversations. Somebody's going to hear this someday, and they don't need to do the headbutt again. They just need to hear this conversation in a way that they go, wait, that's me.
Right.
and something clicks, so that's why these type of conversations are so powerful.
Yes.
But I want us to ease on into this beautiful thing about I'm gonna pass it to you just go into it. We love ladies love receiving roses,
right?
But you do this amazing thing where you teach people about just the process of and significance of the rose. Right. So can you tell us what is it that you do that ties to what we're exploring today?
Self-love.
Yeah.
Roses represent love, right? But oftentimes the funny thing about what the rose represents is a romantic love, but we don't even really love ourselves, right? So I did some digging, how does a rose even grow, right? The first thing is the soil. It got to be rich and moist. And so that means you need to go check the foundation of yourself, right? Are you rich? Are you nurtured? What are you built on? Even if things happen, you can change that. You have the power to do that, to be able to grow into this beautiful rose. And this is for men or women, right? The second step, they need sun to thrive. So what's the energy around you? What kind of energy are you attracting, and what kind of energy are you? Because again, you could be the wrong energy.
Mic drop.
Right? The third one is roses are hungry, right? And they're always hungry. And it made me think about us as people. If you're not hungry to grow and you're not hungry to just evolve in life, then you might as well be dead. Because basically, if you take away the sun and the hunger and the water, then you have nothing to survive. And the same thing with life. If you're just so routine and you're still stuck, it's kind of like the project cycle.
Yeah.
You know, you stuck. So where's your future, right? The fourth one is they need to stay hydrated, but not overly, right?
Well, what does that mean?
This is one of my favorite parts. So who's pouring into you? Making sure that energy, the people around you, that foundation, that they're really keeping you built up, right? But the funny thing about it, I took a twist and said, how much are you pouring out that now you can't even receive to be hydrated? Because you're so busy pouring out everything somebody has poured into you.
No condensation.
Right? It's like, what are you doing? You know, and the last part is pruning, right?
Yeah.
And in this season, I challenge everybody, especially since we're, you know, moving forward to a new year. What is dead in your life that needs to go? What habits, what people, what thought processes, what are you sick of, you know? And that's basically, roses grow back every year if they're pruned right throughout the year.
That is, honey, listen, that's the condensed version,
Yes.
okay?
Yes.
How do we conclude today? Because pros and cons, there are. Daddy's girl doesn't always mean, you know, it's just this beautiful thing.
Yeah, right.
And kudos to the daddy's girls who maybe that is your story or that's the story that you convinced yourself to believe.
Right.
But we did call out, you know, several of the cons, and offline we've even taken a deeper dive into this conversation.
Yes.
And then addressing it, like any, you know, final thought on that, you know.
Sit down with yourself. Be real with yourself. You know, where did you learn the things that you learned? And identify them with feelings, because often people say, like, well, how do I do that? Mm-hmm. Well, again, expose, right? So you gotta sit down and expose yourself to yourself.
So do you dive into this with your beautifully broken but mending well experiences?
Oh,
do
yes.
we get to unpack?
Oh, yeah.
You know, a little bit of the daddy's girl, not necessarily in this way, but in a form, you know, in the form of addressing pros and cons to life experiences and making a decision about what we do today.
Yes.
By way of highlighting, hopefully, the roles.
Right.
But yeah, anything else with addressing that maybe you feel like you didn't convey today?
No, I really feel like, again, you got to have a conversation with yourself first.
Yeah.
And if people keep telling you something and you're irritated by it, guess what? It's right. You only get irritated so often by the truth, because we don't want to hear it.
Ooh, you irritated because you tolerate it.
Right?
So many things.
Yeah.
So moving forward, I love that. I think we said that we wanted to reflect on how what we've learned impact, like fast forward, like present day. What do we know about ourselves, knowing what we know about our past, and tying it into our relationships with our dads.
That's that self-awareness and accountability and owning that. And what part do you need to change? And that goes with the end of pruning season for the rose. What is it that you need to cut off? You know, because I'm sick of today.
Yeah, because I've shifted. I guess I'll call it like my magnetic frequency or something like that. Like I'm becoming more clear on what I desire and what I'm willing to alter about myself to get it and be satisfied, because it's a two-way street. It's far too often that I see women talk about their needs, you know, not considering that when you end up with someone, it goes both ways. And our dads, whether it was emotionally unavailability and whatever else, right, that came to the table, we also have to think about or explore their early years in a sense. So I just wanted to say that my dad also lost his mom as a child, 10 years old, and he didn't know his father. So how can you be available when nobody was available for you and you had to fend for yourself? So there's a delay in growing up. So that's my biggest aha, just having the hunger, like the rose, to seek knowledge and understanding of people's experiences so you can meet them where they are and hopefully walk the line together with the intent of being mutually self-aware.
Yes, totally agree. I think the takeaway today is, I was just sitting here as you were talking and I thought about this. If I could tell ladies anything today to take away, don't lose yourself in a relationship trying to check a box for a daddy's girl.
Bingo.
We always talk about men with the mommy issues, but today the daddy girl syndrome, whether it's positive, negative, whatever it is, don't allow that to lose the woman you are.
Woo! Because guess what? Here we are, speaking of daddy's girls, but we're grown as women today.
Yes.
So if you're operating as daddy's girl, you probably have stunted your growth in a little bit of your womanhood.
Yes.
In a sense. That was the that was a sucker punch. A little bit in a good way. It makes me want to speak to other women who need to get out of the girl and come into the woman.
That's right.
Because it's disabling in a sense.
Because we still want to feel that sense of protection, which again, I'm not trying to take over a gender role or anything like that.
Yeah.
But too often we as women lose ourselves into titles of wife, mother, all these things, sister, daughter, whatever. But we often face divorce years later because we lost ourselves too early on, and we're mad because they're progressing and we're stagnant. Because I don't want people to walk away thinking like you can't have a healthy relationship. That's not true. You can have a healthy relationship, but balance and make sure you never lose you. If you lose you, then that's not the relationship for you.
I think fellas need to hear this conversation as well, because as they're raising their little girls, fathers of daughters, to learn what not to do. In a sense, Tamika, this was amazing. Thank you so much for having me, and I can't wait to tune in to future episodes. You got something with this one, baby.
Well, thank you, listeners. You guys, and we thank Serita, and we really do hope that you get some takeaways from this. And just for more information, you can go to thillconsultant.com and look on social media, same hashtag for everything, T Hill Consultant, and to see further episodes or further experiences, workshops, trainings that we will be offering.